Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today we have a guest who's going to share some exciting information with us. His name is Richard Burke from the Libertarian Party of Oregon. So welcome, Richard Burke.
Well, thank you very much for having me on today.
We are glad to have you. Well, let's get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Okay. My name is Richard Burke, and I'm a member of the Libertarian Party of Oregon. I'm a past party chair, executive director, a national committee member, nominee for Oregon governor. I've worked on a number of libertarian campaigns, including Gary Johnson, Harry Brown, Bob Barr, and others. I've been elected to 8 local offices myself, water boards and school boards, and have been appointed to serve as a member of the state ethics board, which I chaired for 1 year. And I've also done some work for organizations like Americans for Prosperity and other groups. And now I'm the executive director of Western Liberty Network, which provides training to local limited government grassroots activists. So all of that's kept me rather busy.
Excellent. Sounds like a lot of good stuff.
Well,
so what led you to the Libertarian Party in the first place?
Well, I grew up in Nebraska, and the first Libertarian commercial I ever saw was during the 1980 presidential campaign. It was Ed Clark and David Koch, and they talked about getting rid of our offensive nuclear missiles. And at the time, I was not ideologically libertarian and said, boy, are they nuts? We'd be completely undefended. And I actually I supported John Anderson that year and became a Republican. Cast my 1984 vote for Ronald Reagan, and because I agreed with a lot of economic aspects and also the national security stances at that time. But I was driven out because the moral majority in organizations like that, which wanted to use government to impose social values on society, was very strong. So that drove me out of the Republicans to the Democrats. And I was a Democrat for a while for that reason. But as I started a small business, I was sort of driven out of the Democratic Party because of their economic policies and started looking around. And that's when I met Andre Maru, who was a Libertarian candidate for president. I revisited the Libertarian Party and decided this was the party for me. I joined it in 1990, and I have been a proud registered Libertarian ever since.
Wow. 1990, it's 2021. That makes it over 30 years, it sounds like.
It's a long time.
Excellent. So since you mentioned running national campaigns, helping with them, kindly tell our audience what it's like. They may have run local races, they may have helped with local races or state races. What is it like to run a national race for someone like Gary Johnson?
Well, it's very interesting. If you are a pragmatic person, when you sign up for a campaign like that, you know that the likelihood of winning the election is very, very small, almost non-existent. And so what you do is you look to secondary goals. What of value can you bring to the campaign, or can the campaign realize that will outlive the election itself? And what you can do is use these national elections to build the organization, to recruit new members, to get them organized into state, county, and local organizations, to inspire them to run for more winnable local offices. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can move the debate a little bit through appearances in the national media and such. So what you try to do is capitalize on those kind of events. It's really interesting, and you can do productive things, but you've got to have your goals in perspective.
What roles did you play in the campaign? What were your job responsibilities?
With respect to the Johnson and the Barr campaign, I was the Oregon campaign coordinator. So I was sort of in charge of the campaign. And so what I would do is, when the candidate would come to Oregon, I would set up media tours for them and accompany them around the state, the TV stations, and so on, and help in organizing local activities and rallies and so forth, and try to make those come off well. So We would participate in periodic conference calls with other state directors, regional directors, sort of compare best practices and share each other's ideas, but try basically to make the most out of the campaigns that we had.
In regard to your local offices that you won, what do you attribute your success to?
I would attribute the success to a couple of things. First of all, just putting the time into your community, volunteering for things. I was a volunteer with the local high school for a while. I was a member of the Hillsborough Optimist Club. I, developed something of a civic reputation so that people knew that, I wasn't on a 5-state killing spree, that I was a responsible citizen. And then trying to listen to what people were concerned about and offer libertarian solutions to the problems that they cared about. What I find a lot with a lot of alternative parties is people get active because of issues that they care about. Whether it is about, legalizing marijuana, or whether it's the immigration or the gold standard or taxes or whatever it is, gun rights, they get involved because of the issues that activate them. But the issues that activate them are not necessarily the ones that people care the most about. I know one candidate who is of Native American heritage and was really into Native American rights. Very, reasonable things and honorable things to be concerned about. But the district he ran for Congress in, there were virtually no Native Americans there, so he ran on a Native American ticket. He was talking about the issues that he cared about, not the ones that the voters cared about. Now, if your goal is to educate voters on an issue they don't know anything about, that's a good strategy. But if you want to get elected, it's a bad strategy. You've got to find out what people care about, the problems they have in their lives, and offer solutions for their problems. And so what I did when I ran for school board or water district, I did my best to research the district, research the issues, find out what people cared about, and then tried to offer libertarian solutions. For example, getting off of property taxes to support water districts, supporting school choice initiatives, for the school boards, things that people cared about. And when you offer solutions that they care about, you do a lot better in getting support. And most folks, particularly in local races, don't care what your party registration is. Are you a reasonable person? Are you a civically responsible person? And are you speaking to the issues that they care about? If you do those things,
that sounds good. Sounds like good advice.
well,
So I've heard,
your mileage may vary.
so it varies from person to person. Different people may succeed with different strategies than others, do you think?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't get that.
Do you think that different strategies may work well for one person but not for another person?
I think that there's something to that, but I think the strategy that's going to make the most sense is going to depend on what your goals are.
Okay.
The person who runs a race for the purpose of educating the population on a particular issue is going to run a completely different strategy than someone who is running for the purpose of winning the election. And so, whatever your goal is, you should have a primary goal, and you should also have secondary goals. Like your primary goal might be to win an election, but your secondary goal might be to establish a network of volunteers, media contacts, donors, activists, so that after the election is over, whether you win or lose, you've got an organization that you can deploy for some other issue or some other race in the future. So, strategy depends on what your goal is. But generally, libertarians are capitalists. And any capitalist knows you need to appeal to the market or create a market. And so we know what the market is. The market is voters. And candidates are presenting themselves, trying to get the voters to vote for them. So it's a marketing thing. So what you need to do is, if you want to win the election, is find out what the people care about and then give them libertarian solutions to what they care about. And if you were a Green Party member, I would say the same thing. Offer Green Party solutions to what people care about. or anyone else that has a view that they want to project into the body politic.
So when you ran for water district and school board, did you have staff that supported you, or did you run the campaigns all by yourself?
I had some volunteers that helped me. They were volunteers. These were races, that are not typically high dollar races. The constituency was pretty large. Now, the Bolton Valley Water District, where I ran, their constituency is about 250,000 people. They provide water to the Nike World headquarters, Tektronix, Research Foods, and companies like that. So it's a reasonable district, but it didn't, it wasn't a real expensive district. You could campaign by interacting with local newspapers, knocking on doors, meeting with members of neighborhood associations. Word would get around. And, so sometimes to do that, you need help. You need somebody to help with scheduling, somebody to help with, making appointments. And I had some volunteers that would help me. One thing that I realized helped a lot, and this is good advice to anyone who runs a campaign, is to have a written campaign plan. If it's in your idea, if you're doing it on the fly by the seat of your pants, it's going to be hard to do a winning campaign. If you have a written campaign plan with objectives, campaign organization described, tactics that you're going to use, an analysis of your district, a strategy for dealing with your district and getting votes, if you have a budget, if you have a fundraising strategy, if that's all written, it's like a business plan for a business when you're talking to volunteers that are considering donating a lot of their time, or if you're talking to donors who are considering contributing to your campaign, you're going to do a lot better if you can present them with a written campaign plan than if you don't have a written campaign plan, because it makes it more apparent that you know what you're doing and that you have a plan worth investing time and resources in. So that was the big lesson I learned. Have a written campaign plan anytime you run for anything, even if it's dog catcher.
So how did you find these volunteers?
Well, I've been active since 1990. And so, I would go to party meetings and I would meet people in the community. And as I would meet people who were other libertarians. And as I went to other meetings, like school board meetings and city council meetings, I would bump into people who maybe weren't libertarian, but who had some things in common with and had some social interactions and became friends. And these were people who were active. So by just engaging in your community, you meet people, and as you meet more and more people, a certain number of them will prove willing to help you when you're doing something. And over time, you sort of develop a cadre of such folks, and you're willing to help them, they're willing to help you, and when you run for office, hopefully a few of them will volunteer.
Sounds good. So when you were on the state ethics board, what were your responsibilities? What types of job functions did you have?
The Ethics Commission in Oregon has a very narrow mandate. It doesn't deal with everything you would consider ethics. For example, we dealt with conflict of interest, apparent conflict of interest, open meetings laws, whether they were violated or not, whether an office was misused or offices were used for private benefit, those kind of things. We did not have jurisdiction over such things as sexual harassment or, other issues that are moral issues that you might consider ethics or ethical, but were not statutorily a part of the Ethics Commission. So one of the biggest cases that we dealt with when I was chair of the commission was former Governor Kitzhaber, who ended up resigning because of this, had allowed his girlfriend to use offices and resources of the governor to do her private consultancy firm. That was big news, and that was probably the biggest case that we dealt with. There are other people that have literally stolen money from, their jurisdiction, or they made private investments with public money. Those kind of people went to jail in addition to being found guilty of ethics violations. It's a quasi-judicial board. But some of them are very petty. For example, in little towns, people have petty rivalries. And so there was one guy in a little town on the coast. It was 100 degrees, and this young couple was trying to fix their truck in the heat. And so he allowed them, he happened to be in the office that day, he allowed them to come in under a cover and allow them to fix their truck there so that they wouldn't get heat exhaustion. And somebody saw it who didn't like the general manager and reported him as an ethics violation because, he was allowing this young couple to use county resources by bringing their truck under a cover that was there. I mean, that's very petty. And those cases like that we typically dismiss because they were obviously petty and de minimis violations. Most people who were found guilty of ethics law violations didn't know it. They were, violated something accidentally. And there are a lot of ways to fall victim to that. And our mission was to educate, not to punish. But those were the kind of things we dealt with. And it was really interesting. I worked with people of a number of parties on that commission, and it was a very good experience. I am proud, though. I am, however, because of that, I was the first Libertarian to head the governing board of the statewide.
Oh my, that is a big accomplishment. It's awesome. Good job.
You sound like you're in a windy place.
Yes, I'm outside right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually at the public library. So unfortunately, down here in Texas, the wind is blowing right now.
Yeah.
So what happened to that governor?
He ended up resigning in disgrace. He's a Democrat. He's not an evil guy. Basically he delegated this stuff to his staff, and his staff allowed it to happen, but he's still responsible because it was his staff. But it created he had just won re-election narrowly, but this caused him to have to resign, so he resigned the governorship, and then Secretary of State Kate Brown became the governor, and he was fined a nominal amount because he sort of said, "I'm guilty," and fell on his sword. His girlfriend, Sylvia Hayes, ended up getting a very large financial penalty because she fought it tooth and nail and really never did own up to what she had done. But as I said, it wasn't our objective to get people or to nail people. It was our objective to educate people on the ethics laws. But when you're, a governor or you have a high position in state government, you really should know better. And so that was the high-profile case that I had to deal with.
So what are your current activities? What are you doing these days?
Well, right now I am my term on the Ethics Commission expired, and so for the first time since 1993, I was not a public official anymore. And so what I've done is I have focused on a 501c3 I organized called Western Liberty Network. And anyone who's curious can look up westernlibertynetwork.org. And what we do is we train activists how to run for and get elected to local office, how to serve effectively as limited government public office holders once they get there. And for people who don't want to run for office, we teach them campaign management, citizen lobbying, and how to be a skillful volunteer in the issue and candidate campaigns you care about. I do live training all over Oregon and Washington. We do an annual conference. We've got our next conference coming up in Vancouver, Washington on February 5th. We have 20 breakout sessions that are taught by state legislators and other experts in their field. We have celebrity speakers. One of them is Joe Mackey, who's on the Gutfeld show as a comedian. He's going to be our speaker this year, but we've had Kat Timpf, we've had economist Steve Moore, we've had Grover Norquist, who's a nationally recognized person. We've had folks from the Cato Institute, the Cascade Policy Institute, and a lot of others as speakers. And so that event is coming up in Vancouver, Washington on February 5th. But if anyone wants to know what Western Liberty Network is doing, they can go to westernlibertynetwork.org. And if you go to the training tab, there are a lot of training assets that are available free of charge. You can download training documents. They're designed to be provided with live trainings, but they stand on their own. And we also have videos, because every Saturday we have a Zoom call where we have, sometimes I do the training, but sometimes we have professional trainers to teach on different topics. And you can just cruise around and find what interests you and get free training. So that's what I'm doing with my stuff these days.
Excellent. Sounds good. So anybody in our audience, you can check out westernlibertynetwork.org.
Yep. And my phone number is on the contact tab. Love to talk to people.
Okay, so if they want to call you, the number is on the webpage on the contact tab.
That's correct. Email and phone number, all there. They can reach me directly.
Excellent, excellent. Richard, thank you kindly for coming on the podcast today and sharing all your experience and tips from your years of political work for the Libertarian Party.
Well, thank you very much. It was an honor to be on the blog today.
I wish you all the best with the Western Liberty Network and any other endeavors you engage in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good, bye now.
Year.